Hi Greene knows bodybuilding is a science. Get the science right with muscle meds.
So I don't work out. The training session that I did the other day that you were talking about with the movements that you say you thought were unorthodox, I think are very, very necessary and quite the contrary of being unorthodox. I believe every pose starts from the floor up because they do. Because they do start from the floor up, you have to be mindful enough to contract these muscles on command as you're doing a mental inventory, moving from the floor up through your body. So you can't do that you can't do that very quickly and on command without taking the time to sharpen those neurological connections between your mind and those muscles. So, this is, and the way to do that is to walk through those mechanics over and over and over again. And even though the angles may change when your position is on stage, when your foot position or the placement of your body weight or whatever, though those angles may change, of which how it's viewed by a viewing audience, the mechanics are still the same. Glutes are responsible for pelvic flexion. Your glutes are the intermediary between your femur bones. In order to contract them, you have to position yourself in a certain way. By understanding how they move, you're able to duplicate those mechanics while training in the gym, and now you're able to force those muscles to contract against resistance. Over time, you'll develop better mind to muscle connection. You'll be able to do it a lot quicker, and with a little bit of work and time, hopefully you start to be able to look like you can do it effortlessly, on command. Anyway, that's that. Then from there we moved on to stiff-legged deadlift, which is a variation of a stiff-legged deadlift for me because I don't do those for my hamstrings. I do those primarily for my glutes. And there's a lot of different ways to do them. I've seen and heard of powerlifters using one leg at a time, but I think you can do the same thing by just having a very sharp mind to muscle connection. You can almost, even though both legs are down on the floor, you can turn it on in such a way where you can really contract one glute at a time, very, very intensely. And to the naked eye across the room looking at you, it may look like you're doing the same thing. It becomes very hard, to identify what a man is doing, when just staring from across the room. You'd almost need to be inside of his mind and his body, or hook up a, sensitive electrode biofeedback equipment, in order to really be able to deduce what's going on. But for the cheap seats, I just told you. So now you know. So then the next one was stiff-legged deadlifts, and it was glute kickbacks. A lot of people do the same movement on a machine in the gym called a butt blaster, but butt blaster I think is just too restrictive because it's a small machine and doesn't allow me the ability to kind of kick out as much as I like to. So I feel a lot more enclosed when doing that in a butt blaster. And by doing this, what I'm saying technically is that I'm not allowed to really flex my hamstring or get my hamstring involved as much in doing it that way as I can when you do the same movement on a leg curl like what you saw me demonstrate. Also too, if you notice that there's a padding on the piece of equipment which rolls, and it's really built for your own comfort because the machine's not designed for you to put your foot there. It's really designed for you to use that padding to press against, this cushion to protect your ankles and the back of your calves when doing a leg curl. and it rolls. So if you were the common person that's not really ready, not really thought about doing that movement yet, you'll find very quickly when you try it the first time that the padding is more likely to roll off of your foot. And as it will roll away from you, it's very difficult to control it. In fact, in order to control it, you end up having to contract these smaller assisting muscle groups that you probably wouldn't even think of having to activate if you were to climb into a butt blaster machine. This is what you use to help stabilize your femur bone, and indirectly end up working your glutes and your hamstrings and your quads on the other side. You know, you want to minimize the work that you put on your quads, but indirectly you can't get away from it. You know, there's some work that's going to go there automatically, but it's your job to put your mind so much into development of your hamstrings and your glutes that you almost turn it off anywhere else. So the benefit of the stimulus will be not direct, it'll just be indirect. But anyway, that's the food for thought. And then from there you also watched me do step ups.
Excuse me, you were doing a lot of squeezing, weren't you?
Yep, with everything.
Yeah.
With everything.
Can you talk about that for just a moment?
Well, that's really what the whole thing is. You know, you can't get caught up in moving weight. Weight means nothing to a bodybuilder. If somebody that can bench 600 pounds is wonderful, that's great. You know, I can squat this much, and I can squat that much, and I can bench this much, and I can do that. But at the end of the day, the question is, what does it look like when you're on stage? You know, so the guy that can boast about, you know, squatting 3 or 4 times more than you know, really doesn't mean so much when he's standing next to you and his legs doesn't look like yours, or his, you know, overall package and his physique doesn't look like yours. You know, so the tensing and flexing, the squeezing part of it is called isometric tension. And if you don't know, if you never really got a chance to see what that looks like, you could think back in the days when we saw Bruce Lee on the silver screen in the movie Into the Dragon. You know, I think that was probably the first time that, you know, we got a chance to, in our pop culture, to see what isometric tension was when on the silver screen. You know, that was demonstrated by Bruce Lee. He stood there, took off his shirt, and, you know, began to contract these muscles as if he was, and breathing, you know, differently, as if he were, you know, under tremendous amounts of physical stress and pressure, you know, when he wasn't. You know, there was no weight in his hand, but his muscles still contracted as if there were. And that was the visual demonstration of isometric tension. That is really what you're aiming for when you do every exercise that you ever do, whether your back, your traps, your shoulders, your hamstrings, your calves. If you are an aspiring bodybuilder or a Mrs. Jones that just wants to tone, you know, a particular muscle group, you know, the reality is that's what you're aiming to do. If you didn't know that, then that's what you need to be thinking about. There's no idea of moving weight. The weight is just a byproduct. You know, you're contracting those muscles against resistance. The idea of going to a gym and learning how to work a machine, you know, is the misdirection of your focus. You know, your focus needs to be first on how to work the machine, and that machine is you. Every machine in the gym is built around the precept of how to effectively work your machine. You know, it's built around your physiology. You know, for instance, you go to a Cybex or a Hammer Strength, you know, preacher curl machine for your biceps. You know, you're not going to have, you know, some stirrups there for your foot to be placed on a padding and to start doing something odd with your foot to train your biceps on a piece of, you know, selectorized equipment for, you know, bicep training. That's because the physiology dictates that. The mechanics of what your bicep is supposed to do, to move the ulna and radius, and to contract, to close the elbow joint, so that's why you would do a curl like that. Anyway, the point I'm just trying to get to is that your machine is the most important machine that needs to be understood, and those are the mechanics that need to be worked. So the idea of moving weight, it's almost like, I guess one of them, ideas that are just, lost in translation. Get it out of your head. Oh yeah, I gotta bench this much and I gotta move that much. Because with the wrong mechanics, you can move the weight, but then not ever have the development to show for it because the wrong muscle groups are coming into play. You ever see those guys that bench a lot of weight but then have no chest to show for it? That's because your front delts and other secondary muscle groups come into play while performing the movement. Bad mechanics, so that's the misuse of your machine. So think about your machine, learn how to use your machine more effectively. The way to do that is to get out of the concept of just moving weight. You want to contract muscles. What does contract muscles mean? It means using this principle, this idea of isometric tension, and by doing that, you'll be that much more advanced in your ability to train a muscle and also be able to show a muscle.